Safety camera only, G28, take 3.
I get such a kick out of seeing the Warner Brother logo on the front of LA Confidential. Warner Brothers, the studio that brought us Edward G. Robinson as Little Caesar, James Cagney as Public Enemy, Bogart in so many great pictures, right up through Bonnie and Clyde. Entertaining melodramas all, but also unique in that they all looked at life in America through a slightly subversive lens. And I like to feel that our picture and our guys, Russell Crowe and Guy Pearce, are an extension of that tradition. LA Confidential, the movie, started when I read James Ellroy's book.
In 1988 and 89, I wrote LA Confidential. It was big, it was epic, it was huge. It was a book for the whole family, if the name of your fucking family is the Charles Manson family.
Nobody moves!
I found myself hooked on his characters, and I found myself having a very interesting emotional reaction to them. As you meet each of these guys, Bud, Ed, and Jack, you don't like them. And yet, as I kept going, I found myself getting emotionally involved with each and every one of them. And the more I thought about that, I thought if I could replicate that experience for the movie-going audience, I would have a unique movie. I would also have one that dealt with one of my favorite themes, something I've dealt with before, the difference between image and reality. And I would be able to do what I'd always wanted to do, which is deal with that theme in Los Angeles, the city of manufactured illusion.
Cut! That's a print.
I discovered that David Walper had optioned the movie rights to the book some 3 or 4 years before.
My wife was reading the book LA Confidential. She said, you ought to read the book, it makes an interesting read. So I read the book and I said, gee, this would make a good miniseries for television. And I started to go to the 3 television networks. I couldn't sell any of the 3 networks on the idea.
Nat Sobel, my agent, and I laughed like hell because we thought this fucker was movie adaptation, bro. It was big, it was bad, it was bereft of sympathetic characters. It was unconstrainable, uncontainable, and unadaptable.
So I went out and had a meeting with David and with Bill Gerber, who was the point person for Warner Brothers, and made a deal to write and direct the movie.
Here's a director who has such a passion for film that you can't just turn him away. He's a terrific director, and with such passion, you've got to listen.
Cut. Of the many, many, many decisions made on LA Confidential, as it happens, the luckiest one, and in hindsight, the smartest one, was also the first one. And that was to team up with Brian Helgeland, who had been very interested in adapting LA Confidential.
Basically couldn't get anyone to even talk to me about it. And then when I finally got a meeting at Warner's to pitch how I would do the book, and 2 days before that, my agent called and told me that the meeting was canceled because they had hired you to do it.
Missy Malcolm, your agent, called up and said,
right,
you got to meet this guy, Brian.
I was used to pitching to studios. Now I had to kind of pitch to the guy who had already been hired to do it.
It just seemed that we both felt the same way, that extraordinary liberties would have to be taken with that convoluted, dense plot of Ellroy, but that there'd be a way to let the characters kind of guide us through that.
Right, to try and preserve the people and not the plot.
There were certain plot elements that always were a kind of constant that we wanted to keep, sort of set pieces.
Bloody Christmas, Night Owl.
Exley's interrogation scene.
Bud's whole relationship with Lynn.
I wondered when you might knock on my door again, Officer White. The dialogue initially led me. It was just such a wonderfully written piece. They both did, you know, Curtis and Brian, they did a wonderful job.
I remember when we finally had the draft where we said, okay, well, let's show it to Ellroy and see what the hell he thinks about it. And his reaction was, let's have dinner.
Right.
Which we knew was obviously a good sign.
Well, you thought it was. I was convinced it was a hit.
I think Curtis Hanson and Brian Helgeland, the co-scenarists, brilliantly adapted my book. Hansen and Helgeland took my three-man structure, everything seen through the eyes of Bud White, Ed Exley, and Jack Vincennes, and brilliantly condensed the story down to manageable proportions.
We must have a clarification session one of these days.
The script and the movie are kind of a hybrid between a studio movie and an independent movie. Studio movie because it's a period picture, it's big, 45 locations, 80 speaking parts. It needs that kind of feel, budget, and so forth. On the other hand, it's the kind of movie the major studios don't want to make because it's multi-character. It does not lend itself to being a star vehicle.
I saw an opportunity, a character-driven piece with a studio backing it. That's kind of unheard of. So, you know, I think in independent filmmaking you get more of an opportunity.
Billy Gerber engineered a smooth segue over to Regency and Arnon Milchan and Michael Nathanson, who eventually became my producing partners.
Before you hear the story, you look at the eyes. The look I got is the look of passion and decency at the same time. You know, very often you don't get them together.
My request was that he not be allowed to read the script because I didn't want him to imagine the movie that I wanted to make. So I put together a group of 18 photographs. Some of them were pictures I'd had for years as a longtime Angelino. They represented the movie of my dreams.
Curtis' visuals spoke a million words.
He bought in to the movie that I wanted to make.
I had to be in this movie. I had to be in business with Curtis.
He rolled the dice with me. He rolled the dice big time. My hope was to cast actors that the audience didn't already know, actors that the audience could discover the way I had discovered them in the book. Russell Crowe was somebody who I had seen in a picture called Romper Stomper, where he plays a neo-Nazi skinhead, and I knew from that he could play the brutal side of Bud White.
And what?
We flew him over here, I met with him, we talked about the character, and I put him on tape doing a scene.
Get out of the fucking hospital! A naked guy with a gun. You expect anyone to believe that?
What's the matter? I ruined another arrest via perfect record. Get the fuck out of my face.
I think it's gonna look on your report.
You worry about how it's gonna look, okay? What it is justice. That's what the fat fuck got. Justice.
And I took this tape out to Arnon's house.
I said, this guy is great.
And I said, this is my Bud White.
So I said, who is it? He said, well, it's a guy called Russell Crowe. I said, oh, he's great. Where is he from? I said, oh, he's Australian. I said, oh, he's Australian. Okay.
A few weeks later, Mally Finn, my fabulous casting director, she brought in Guy Pearce. He walked in the door. I had no idea who he was. I'd never seen him before. We said hello. I could tell from his voice that he was from Australia. He sat down. He gave a reading for the part of Ed Exley, and he was dynamite.
You did Casitas youth camp with him, right?
I gave him a few pointers just to have him do it again and do it a little differently to see if he could make the adjustments. And I was very impressed, so I brought him back, and I put him on tape.
Well, Leroy told me you went sissy up at Casitas. You couldn't do the time, so you got yourself a big white boy to look after you. Said they called you Sugar because you gave it out so sweet.
I took the tape again out to Arnon's beach house, and I just said, here's Ed Exley.
And Curtis says he's Australian. I said, what? You're kidding. He said, we're doing a period movie in Los Angeles with the two Australian leads.
I find working with accents, putting on a different accent to me is just like putting on another jacket.
It's been a learning curve here very definitely for me coming to America. I feel very privileged being able to come to America and make movies.
I feel very lucky, you know, to be working with these guys.
And Arnon, he took a big gulp and he said, but Curtis, are we going to have any names in this picture? And I said, yes, for the part of Jack Vincennes, the Big V, Hollywood Jack, a movie star among cops. That's a perfect part for a movie star.
Freeze! Police!
But again, I wanted a movie star who could still surprise the audience. I met Kevin on LA Confidential for the first time at the Formosa, the way I met a number of my collaborators, and I showed him the same photo presentation, and then I handed him the script and I said, Kevin, when you read this, I want you to think of 2 words. Dean Martin, the epitome of 50s hip. The laid-back guy, dressed to the nines, a beautiful woman on his arm, the answer to every question.
Hey, you know me, I'm keeping the streets safe, boys.
It's the best bit of direction I could have possibly given Kevin. He took that idea of the Dean Martin persona and reinvented it to fit himself, and then shows us the man who, little by little, has lost his soul.
He's got all this veneer and exterior going on, and yet there's something underneath that's just not right. And he finally, I think, begins to recognize that in the course of the film.
I feel that Kim Basinger was more or less born to play the part of Lynn Bracken.
He was so convinced that I was the Veronica Lake character that he convinced me that I was going to play her. When someone believes in you that much, that's half the battle. You want to work with people who believe in you and want you in the role,
She's sad, she's wise, she's the one character that knows the truth about herself and can see the truth in the other characters. Like Veronica Lake, Kim has a very powerful image, and I think Kim, more than probably any woman alive, knows that an image like that is both an asset and also a liability. The fun thing about Danny DeVito's character is that he's a visionary, sort of Christopher Columbus of tabloid journalism.
Circulation 36,000 and climbing. There's no telling where this is gonna go. Radio, television. Once you whet the public's appetite for the truth, the sky's the limit.
He has no qualms or any kind of feeling, moral feelings about, luring a couple of, stars who are under contract at Metro into some kind of compromising situation, and then, photographing it and sticking it on the front of his magazine.
And behind the camera, I was able to put together an unbelievable group of collaborators, starting with Dante Spinotti, a cameraman whose work I'd known and admired for years.
My number one directive to my collaborators was, let's push the set dressing and so forth into the background so that the characters and their emotions are in the foreground. And Dante, of course, immediately got what I was talking about, and he suggested a whole lighting style, a kind of naturalistic look where the audience would understand where the light was coming from in every scene, and it would be very different than what one thinks of as classic film noir, that highly stylized lighting with the long dark shadows. Janine Opperwall is an extraordinary production designer. We had 45 locations. My goal was to find locations that would not call attention to themselves as period locations. We wanted the movie to feel ordinary, casual in its period look.
Our costume designer, Ruth Myers, created high style in the grand Hollywood tradition to assist Lynn Bracken in the creation of her fantasies. For the other characters, she was true to the period, but again, with the accent on the modern, on that which would feel contemporary. With close to 80 speaking parts and numerous featured extras, her job was enormous.
I love music, and I love music in movies. With LA Confidential, I picked a lot of the songs back when Brian and I were writing the script, and most of them before we started shooting, which allowed me actually to play them on the set when we were shooting a given scene. For instance, the scene where Kevin Spacey's in the frolic room sitting at the bar. I had Dean Martin on the jukebox that night, and as Kevin looks in the mirror and he's feeling remorseful about what he's done and regretful about what he's become, you hear Dean Martin singing, "Smile, smile, smile." Then, of course, I needed underscoring to play the emotion, to play the action, and I brought in Jerry Goldsmith, with whom I had worked on The River Wild. It was a unique challenge for Jerry because I already had all the songs in the picture, and what Jerry needed to do was not only create a score, but do it in such a way that it wouldn't feel like the songs and the score were in two different pictures. The motif that was consistent in the songs was the trumpet of Chet Baker in several tracks and Bobby Hackett on a couple of others. So Jerry took the trumpet and used it throughout the score to create a musical whole. When Peter Honess, my patient, creative, diligent editor, and I had a first cut of the movie, and we took it out to show it to Arnon and David Walper and Michael Nathanson and David Madelon and so forth, we were nervous in the way that one always is at that time.
I'm sitting watching this movie, and I'm pinching myself.
What you really learn from a first screening is not anything constructive, but you learn how the emotional state is going to be for the next few months. You know, whether you're going to be kind of fighting while you're trying to do what you do, or whether you're going to be feeling good while you try to do what you do.
But I walked out of the screening room, and I'm seeing all these guys with these notes, and I came out and said, guys, I don't have any notes before anybody opens their mouth. This is a masterpiece. This is our greatest movie ever. I mean, I have not seen a better movie since we've started this company.
His enthusiasm was so obvious and contagious that I don't know whether everybody else felt that way or not, but they weren't about to be the one to throw cold water on the spirit.
I think that the theme of the movie is the word facade, and I think the theme of life, one of the many themes of life, is facade. I think we all have facades. I think they're important, but then I think it's wonderful to have someone you can come down and throw that facade to the wind and just be yourself.
Ultimately, it's a story about Los Angeles, and it's a story about what was at the heart of a kind of boom in Los Angeles, of a building and promise of the Golden Land. And as, of course, things turn out, it's always a little different than it looks.
Here was a compatible vision, unique on its own terms, of a book that I wrote, characters and a milieu that I created. They assumed a brilliant alternative life, and I was flabbergasted and startled by the experience.
I think what I learned from you, which I had to some extent, because I think you have to have it working in show business, but which I really didn't realize the power of, was just the tenacity of just believing in something. Like you said, no one really believes in a good movie except for the people making it.
LA Confidential already seen 7 times. For my own, I just love the movie, so.
The miracle of LA Confidential is not only was I able to make this labor of love, but because Arnon bought into my dream to the degree that he did, and that he was prepared to roll the dice with me to the degree that he was, I was able to make it under the best circumstances I've ever worked.
You heard it here first. Off the record, on the QT, and very hush.